How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Math with Corey. Today we're going to be completing the square. I'll walk you through two example problems, and our goal is to write our equation with a perfect square binomial on the left side, some constant b on the right side, and then from there we're going to be able to solve for x, okay? Now some of you may ask, why do I have to complete the square? Why is this useful? Well, it serves as an alternative to using the quadratic formula, so it's definitely an important method to learn and to master. So by the end of this video, hopefully you'll get a better understanding how to solve by completing the square. Alright, so let's do that now. Alright, so for this first example problem, one thing that we always have to consider is what is the leading coefficient, right? When completing the square, you need your leading coefficient to be 1. It can't be anything else. So in this case, luckily it is 1, right? So the number in front of this x squared is 1. That's the leading coefficient. It's 1. We can complete the square. Okay. So let's jump into the steps of completing the square. The first thing that I'm going to want to do, step 1, is to bring that constant over to the right side. Okay. So when I do that, something you're going to see is I'm going to leave a little space, okay, right here. And you're going to see why I do that. But again, I'm just bringing that constant over to the right side. Okay, great. Next thing I want to do is consider the coefficient of the middle term. This number right here, -8, okay? What I'm going to want to do with -8 is divide it by 2 and then square it. Okay, so -8 divided by 2 squared. Okay, so that number right here, -8, divided by 2, and then square it. Okay. So when I do that, this is going to be -4 squared, which equals 16. Okay. Next, what I'm going to want to do is add 16 to the left side and add 16 to the right side. So what I do to one side, I must do to the other. Okay, I'm not changing the overall value of this equation. Okay, I'm balancing it, right? So if I add 16 to this side and add 16 to this side, that's what I'm going to want to do. Okay, great. So now, okay, I'm just going to rewrite this. X squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 11. -5 plus 16 equals 11. Okay, so now, okay, I'm going to write it. I'm going to want to write it in this form now, right? Because this is a perfect square trinomial, okay? So now I'm going to be able to write it in this form. But what is a? What is a going to be? Well, let's see. I'm going to have x plus or minus some number squared equal to some constant. Well, we have our constant over here. But what's going to be our number here? What you're going to find is your number that you're going to put inside the parenthesis here is always going to be this number here, right? It's going to be the number, right? It's going to be -8 divided by 2, which is -4. It's always going to be that number, which is pretty cool, okay? So now I'm just going to put that number in. So it's going to be -4 squared equals 11. Okay, and if you want to do x minus 4 times x minus 4, right, those are the factors, you'd get right back here, okay? So that's something important to note. It's always going to be this number here. Okay, great. So now what I'm going to want to do is solve for x. Okay, how can I do that? Well, if I take the square root of both sides, I can essentially get rid of that squared here. So square root of both sides, and something that's very important, okay, is I'm going to get a plus and a minus, right? Plus or minus the square root of 11. So let me write this a little more neat. So x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 11. Okay, very nice. Last step in solving for x, I'm going to want to bring that -4 over to the right side. So it's going to be x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 11. Okay, great. So now you could see that I have two solutions. That's why it's so important that you do not forget the plus and minus. Because one solution is x equals 4 plus the square root of 11. And the other solution is 4 minus the square root of 11. Okay? So let's look at number 2 now. Okay, so number 2. This is 3x squared minus 12x minus 7, okay? So now for this one, you see that the leading coefficient is not 1, it's rather 3. okay? And in order to solve by completing the square, I need that leading coefficient to be 1, okay? But let's keep this consistent, and let's make our first step to bring that constant over to the right side. So let's do the same thing. So this is going to be 3x squared minus 12x equals 7. Okay, just brought that constant over to the right side. That is always my first step. Okay, next thing I'm going to want to do is divide everything by 3. Why is that? Well, if I divide everything by 3, okay, this is going to be x squared, which is exactly what I need, right? So if I divide by 3, this is going to be 1, okay? And that's what I need in order to solve by completing the square. So then this is going to be negative 4x. Now I'm going to leave this space here, equals 7/3. Okay, great. Next thing, okay, is to take this negative 4, divide it by 2, and then square it. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and negative 2 squared is 4, okay? All right, so I'm going to add 4 to the left side and add 4 to the right side. Okay, so now this is x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 19/3. Okay, great. All right, so now, again, I want to write it in this form. So how can I do that? Well, it's going to be x. Well, what is a going to be? A is always going to be this number right here. It's going to be negative 2. So minus 2 squared equals 19/3. Okay, now I'm going to want to solve for x. Okay, I take the square root of both sides, and hopefully this time you do not forget your plus and minus, right? Very important. Okay, so this is going to be x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 19/3. Okay. Next, I'm going to want to bring this over to the right side, right? That's my last step in solving for x. So x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 19/3. Okay, great. So again, I have 2 solutions, not just one, I have 2. One of them is 2 plus the square root of 19/3, and the other one is x equals 2 minus the square root of 19/3. Okay, so that's why it's very important that you do not forget your plus and minus. Okay, last thing I want to consider with you is something that looks like this. What if I had this? Negative x squared minus 6x plus 7 equals 0. So the first step you should be thinking is to bring the constant over to the right side, right? That's always your first step. But, okay, again, this leading coefficient here is not 1. It's negative 1, okay? And you might say, well, negative 1's kind of like 1, right? No, right? Not at all. You still have to divide, right, everything by negative 1, right? So if I were to do this, right, I'd have negative x squared minus 6x equals negative 7. I would have to divide everything by negative 1, okay? Just like I divided everything by 3, right? Doesn't matter what it is, right? This leading coefficient has to be 1, right? Okay. If you guys have any questions, leave it in the comments below. Thank you for watching.